Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio. He's the vice chairman of the Select Committee on Intelligence. Senator, thanks for being here.
Hey, Brett, thanks.
We just talked to Senator Warner about this bill that essentially would allow the administration to ban TikTok. As you look around the country at the map, there are states, a number of them, who have decided to ban TikTok on all state devices. There are a lot of parents out there tonight who have kids who are on TikTok all the time. What do you say to them about this bill and why it's important?
Well, I actually think we should pass a bill that bans TikTok. I have the only bipartisan, bicameral bill that actually does that. And I think Mark's bill takes steps in that direction. It gives the administration the power to do what I think they already have the power to do. But in either respect, you have this growing consensus up here at a time when there's not a lot of consensus that this is important. Here's why it's important. It's not the videos. Look, there's some stuff on there that's disturbing, and there's some stuff on TikTok that I think is pretty catchy and pretty creative. It's not the content per se. It's the data, the amount of data that is collected. And data is the most valuable commodity in the world. Now, they all control data, you know, Facebook, Twitter, Snap, all of these, Instagram. The difference is the data here in the fastest growing app in America is controlled by a company that's owned by a Chinese company, and that Chinese company, ByteDance, is under the complete control of the Communist Party of China. Like every company, if the Chinese government tells ByteDance, we want all the data you collected from TikTok in the United States, they have to turn it over. And that data is everything from, you know, your pictures to your contacts to what you watched on TikTok, and it also creates the opportunity for backdoors and beyond. And that's the reason why this administration has banned it on all federal devices, but somehow thinks it's okay to continue to allow it to operate in society writ large. It's a massive vulnerability that needs to be closed, or we're going to pay the price.
When you hear lawmakers, backed up by the ACLU, which writes this letter saying it's a purported attempt to protect the data of U.S. persons from Chinese government acquisition, this legislation would instead limit Americans' political discussion, artistic expression, free exchange of ideas, and even prevent people from posting cute animal videos and memes. Well, how do you respond to them?
Well, I would respond that we're not doing it because of any of those reasons, because there are other platforms they could do it on, and theoretically they could do it on a TikTok that's no longer owned by ByteDance. The only problem here is not what they're posting. Okay, the problem here is who owns that device, who owns that software that's on the devices of millions of Americans. That's the issue. So it's not the content that is being restricted. No one here is passing a bill banning the posting of these things. The ban is against the ownership. If tomorrow TikTok was sold to a company that wasn't ByteDance, that wasn't under the Chinese national security laws and the conditions that imposes, there'd be no issue at all. We have a right to protect our country from foreign ownership over companies that are directly linked to the Communist Party of China.
A lot of concern about China's aggressive actions on surveillance. Obviously, we saw the balloon and the reaction to that. Here's General Keane on these cranes around the country.
This is part of the most comprehensive penetration of the United States in our entire history. And I don't think we're necessarily surprised by the revelation that they've got electronic means on these cranes. And we got to have a wake-up call here in terms of, you know, what is really happening.
You guys concerned about that as well?
The wake-up call here is that we're engaged in the most massive great power rivalry and probably in human history. It's the normal course of things over the last 500 years. The last 20 years were an exception, and it involves everything, everything. Technology and science, economics, it involves information that we talked about, TikTok, it involves the military, it involves every aspect of our society and economy is implicated in this competition. And we need to wake up to that reality. The Chinese are fully aware of it. There isn't an industry that's important that they don't want to dominate, and there isn't an opening in our country that the Chinese Communist Party is not willing to use to benefit themselves at our expense. They're doing what countries have normally done for 500 years. They're acting in the best interest of their country. We now need to act in the best interest of ours.
For some people who look at China and say they have big problems. They're trying to move millions of people from urban to rural to urban settings. They've got 70–80% of their supply chain that they have to bring in. If we put the clamps on them, they would feel the heat. Are we building them up to be something that they're not?
No, I think our biggest problem isn't China. Our biggest problem is us. Our biggest problem is waking up to realize that we're in a competition because we haven't acted that way for 20 years. China does have problems. I've said that repeatedly. They're not the 12-foot giant that somehow is destined to rule the world. But they've grown faster, they've grown more prosperous, and they've grown more powerful. at our expense. It's okay if they're going to be a big, powerful country. They're going to matter. They're going to be a great power. We're not trying to prevent that, but it can't come at our expense. It can't come by taking away our jobs, our industries, and our capabilities, and that's what's happened. And that's what can no longer be allowed to happen.
I want to ask you about another issue, and that is this Nord Stream 2 attack. The New York Times has a headline, "Intelligence suggests pro-Ukrainian group sabotage pipeline, U.S. officials say. Any suggestion of Ukrainian involvement, whether direct or indirect, could upset the delicate relationship between Ukraine and Germany, souring support among a German public that has swallowed high energy prices in the name of solidarity." There are some who are saying that the U.S. was behind it. Is it clear now that Russia was not behind it?
I think it's clear now the U.S. was never behind it. I thought that was always a silly theory. I won't comment on that story because that story purports to leak information that's classified, which we should be protecting in this country. Apparently, people in the administration who are the ones that have access to that feel like they have the right to leak whatever they want.
Yeah, I get that, Senator, but are we going to get to the bottom of it, I guess, is the answer?
Well, I think that's an interesting, I mean, look, the administration can declassify any documents they want, and if they do that, then I'll be more than happy to discuss it. Suffice it to say that that conflict in Ukraine and in Europe is a complex one. It's complicated, and most certainly there are things involved in it that are complex. But the Russians have done plenty. They don't have to blow up a pipeline to tell you that the Russians have done plenty, including commit horrifying atrocities in that conflict. And they invaded a country that isn't theirs. They simply invaded a neighboring country. Yeah. And if that's the world we now live in, where countries can invade their neighbors, we're going to have a long century ahead.
And quickly, do you think that the bipartisan support for supporting Ukraine financially with arms is still as strong as it was up on Capitol Hill?
I think there's strong support for funding a strategy. I don't think there's strong support for funding a stalemate. I think there's strong support for funding a strategy that has to be weighed against our other priorities. I do think Ukraine still has a lot of support here. Obviously, it's their fight. We've been helpful. They've done a great job of fighting. But obviously, there has to be funding a strategy, which this administration still has not defined what our national security interests are and what our end goals are and what we're doing. And I think that's really important as we keep coming back to Congress for more money.